Ever get that like little thrill? You know when you flip something over and it says made in the USA?
Yeah,
Kind of takes you back, doesn't it?
it does. It's like finding a little piece of, I don't know, like a simpler time, maybe.
Totally. And it got me thinking, like, when did seeing made in the USA become so rare?
Right.
And like, what happened to all the stuff that used to be made here? I mean, we're diving deep into that good old made in the USA nostalgia. We're going to look at where it came from, where it went, and why it still tugs at our heartstrings.
Exactly. And, we've got some really interesting sources for this deep dive. We've got articles about the history of American manufacturing. We've got economic data about trade and job losses. Oh, and we've got some firsthand accounts from people who've seen this whole shift firsthand, like folks who worked in factories that aren't there anymore.
Exactly. We're going to try to understand not just the economics of it all, but also what it meant, what it means for us as a society, and maybe even like who we are. So let's rewind a bit. Back in the day, Made in America wasn't just a label, it was like the expectation, right?
Yeah, especially during that mid-20th century boom. I mean, after World War II, forget about it. America was the manufacturing powerhouse.
Yeah.
Cars, clothes, electronics, you name it, we made it, and we made it well.
Right. Like that whole like golden age you hear about sometimes.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just some kind of like marketing thing. It really was tangible. Like my grandparents, they'd tell stories about, the factories were humming, everyone had good jobs. It
Yeah.
felt like you could, I don't know, you could feel the country like
Yeah.
running on this engine of made in the USA.
It was a source of pride, too.
Yeah.
Like you said, good jobs, a thriving middle class. You could build a whole life around a factory job.
But then something changed. What happened?
Well, things got more complicated. By the 1990s, globalization really took off. And it's easy to point fingers, right? To say that companies just decided to move factories overseas for cheaper labor.
Right.
But it's more nuanced than that. Companies here and in other countries, they were all trying to figure out how to stay afloat, how to compete in this new global market.
Okay, so it's like this perfect storm of different factors, and it's like globalization was this huge wave that kind of swept over everything.
Exactly. And yeah, some companies saw an opportunity with cheaper labor overseas. And let's be real, sometimes it was more than just that. Sometimes it was about looser regulations,
Right.
less oversight. And for other companies, it was just about trying to keep their heads above water as this global competition heated up.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw the impact.
Oh, absolutely.
Like here in the US, factories shut down, those jobs that built the middle class, they dried up, especially in these towns where manufacturing was everything.
It was devastating. And we're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet. We're talking about real people's lives.
Exactly. And I think that's sometimes what gets lost in these conversations about like global economics. We have numbers like the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They're the ones tracking all this.
Right.
They said between 2000 and 2019, America lost something like 5 million manufacturing jobs.
5 million.
Yeah.
That's more than the entire population of some states.
Yeah.
Each one of those jobs represents a person, a family, a whole story.
And it's like a chain reaction, right? Those jobs disappear. Suddenly there's less money flowing through these local economies. Businesses close. It ripples out.
Exactly. It's like you said earlier, it's a chain reaction. Less money in people's pockets means less spending, which hurts businesses, which leads to more job losses, and so on. And on a bigger scale, this is where we get into the whole thing about the trade deficit.
The trade deficit, right. So for folks who aren't economists, which is probably most of us,
Yeah.
explain it. Like, what is that exactly?
Think of it like this. Say you're buying a bunch of stuff from a friend, but your friend isn't buying anything from you.
Right.
You end up spending way more than you're making. That's kind of what's happening with the trade deficit. We buy more from other countries than they buy from us.
Okay, so like on a national scale.
Exactly. And it's not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. Trade can be mutually beneficial. But when we're talking about massive trade deficits year after year, that can be a sign of an imbalance, and it can have real consequences for American workers and the economy as a whole.
Yeah, and we've seen those consequences. Like Michigan, Ohio, they got hit especially hard.
Absolutely. These were places built on manufacturing.
Yeah.
And when those jobs went away, it wasn't like people could just flip a switch and find new ones.
Right. It's not that simple. And the Economic Policy Institute, they actually did a study. They estimated that just the trade deficit with China alone, just China,
Wow.
cost the U.S. something like 1.7 million manufacturing jobs over a recent 5-year period.
Wow. That's huge, and it underscores just how complex this issue is. We're not talking about some simple equation here. These are real lives,
Yeah.
real communities impacted by a whole web of global forces.
Right. And it's not just the economics of it all. There's like a deeper layer to all of this.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
when I see Made in the USA, it's almost like there's this wave of nostalgia, right? Like it takes me back to, I don't know, a time when things felt, I don't know, simpler, maybe a little more secure.
I get that. I think it's about more than just the products themselves. It's about what that label represents. It's
Mm-hmm.
about good jobs, a thriving middle class,
Yeah,
a
exactly.
sense of stability, and honestly, maybe even a bit of national pride.
Yeah.
It's that idea of, hey, we can make things here,
Yeah.
and we can make them well.
Yeah. And it's interesting because in some of the stuff we read, it talked about this idea of the social contract. Like if you work hard, you play by the rules, you should be able to have a good life, right? Buy a house, raise a family, all of that.
Yeah, it's that sense of fairness,
Yeah, exactly.
that if you put in the effort, you'll be rewarded. And
Yeah.
for a lot of people, that felt broken,
Yeah.
especially in those communities we were talking about where manufacturing was the lifeblood. Suddenly, the rules didn't seem to apply anymore. And that's a really tough thing to grapple with.
Right. And I think that's what gives this made in the USA thing so much weight. It's not just about where something's made, it's about what that represents, about our values, about our sense of community, and maybe even about, feeling like we have some control in what feels like an increasingly chaotic
Hmm.
world. And, it's interesting. There's been this renewed interest lately in bringing manufacturing back to the US.
Yeah. There's definitely a movement towards that. And it's not just nostalgia.
Right.
Companies are realizing that having all their production overseas can be risky, especially with all the disruptions we've seen lately. Pandemics, political instability, you name it. It's made them rethink things.
Totally. And I think there's also this growing awareness about like ethical consumption, right?
Yeah.
People want to know where their stuff is made, how it's made, and what kind of impact their purchases are having on the world.
Absolutely. It's like people are waking up to the true cost of things. It's not just about the price tag anymore. It's about the environmental impact, the labor practices, the whole story behind the product.
Right. And that little made in the USA label, it becomes a symbol of all of that.
It's a way for people to vote with their wallets, to support companies that align with their values.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, next time you're out and about and you see that made in the USA label, doesn't matter if it's on a t-shirt, a tool, or like an old transistor radio, take a second and think about what it really represents.
Yeah,
Because it's more than just a label. It's a whole conversation starter about our economy, our values, and I don't know, maybe even our future.
it really makes you think.
It really does. And you know what? On that note, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.